I am a police officer working on an emergency response team on a busy London borough. We took a call to a suspected domestic incident in a block of flats. The informant said that she could hear screaming and sounds of disturbance coming from the flat above her own. Once we arrived, my colleague and I knocked on the door of the flat the informant said the noise was coming from. I had heard nothing on my way up and certainly couldn't hear any disturbance coming from the address. To be honest, I heard nothing at all. After knocking twice, we had no response. My colleague left me to go downstairs and speak directly to the informant. I stayed by the door. I knocked again, and after some time it was answered by an elderly woman. She had clearly been asleep and was alarmed to see me standing outside. I told her that someone had called saying that they could hear a disturbance coming from within her address. I asked her if there was anyone else inside with her. She looked bemused and told me that she lived alone and had been sleeping. I asked her if I could come in to satisfy myself that no one else was in there. She invited me in and I walked into what was a small 2-bedroom flat. The flat was in darkness, apart from her hall light and her bedside lamp. I began searching through the flat. As I approached the final door, the living room, my colleague called me up on the radio. He told me that he was on his way and asked if I was okay. I told him everything was fine, wondering why he sounded so flustered. He told me that he was with the informant and could also hear screaming and loud thuds coming from the flat I was in. I told him that he must be mistaken, as I was almost done searching the flat and I had heard nothing whatsoever. I have to admit a feeling of unease as I opened the final door. Like all the other rooms, it was in darkness but was freezing cold. My breath misted immediately. There was no one in the room and no signs of disturbance. No window was open. I called my colleague and asked him to listen out for my footfall. He said he could hear my feet as I stomped them, but said that the screaming had stopped. This coincided with me opening the door. I left shortly after apologizing to the elderly woman for waking her. I have no rational explanation for this at all. My colleague and I left feeling very creeped out. My family moved to this standard upscale suburban home after roughing it out for a couple of years to save up. We also got a deal on the home because it was a model home before it was ours, like had all the fake furniture to show off the neighborhood homes. Anyways, it had this loft area with 2 stairwells that go up to it, one in the front and one in the back. You could pretty much hear everything from this loft since it was so open. One day, my 2 best friends are hanging out in the loft. We were in high school and they were always all over each other, whether I was in the room or not. We were watching TV and I get up to pee. When I left, they were all up on each other. When I came back, they were on different ends of the couch. I thought they had gotten into a fight, so I asked what was up. "Your little sister is home," the dude says. My face turned sheet white. "What's wrong?" the girl asked. I asked them what made them think that. They said they heard her. I am sort of freaking out at this point. "No one's here," I said. "We checked the house and I'm right." Well, it turns out that before this was a model home, a family lived here and the little girl had been playing in the loft, but had climbed on the railing and fell to her death below. My 2 best friends swear to this day that they heard what they thought was my sister laugh and run up the stairs, hitting her hands on each step like she was running up on all 4s. I never had any encounters other than the fact that right next to where she landed was the house's central intercom. We had an intercom system in every room that you could play music through or talk to each other. Every so often at night, at the same time, you'd wake up to the intercom button being pressed, and just a blank sound of static airways like someone was holding down the button but no one was speaking. My room was on the 3rd floor and I'd have to walk down to the bottom to the main unit and turn it off there. I always thought I'd see her. I'll begin by saying I'm personally more on the side of a skeptic frame of mind with any paranormal experience. But enough things have happened in the last year to make me at least question that and entertain the possibility that this is legit and not just my daughter's active imagination. These events have occurred only in the house my husband and I bought as of June 2017. First, in October of 2017, I was laying her down for bed in the dark with only the moonlight lighting the bedroom. She pointed across the room and asked, "Mom, who's that guy?" I looked for a toy or something she could be referring to, but saw nothing, so I asked, "What guy, honey?" She responded that he was right there, and gestured towards the closed bedroom door. Still curious, I asked her what he was doing in case I could piece together some recent episode of pretend play or a toy she commonly talked about, but she said he was hiding. I asked if he was scared. She said, "No, he's hiding." During this whole exchange, she was calm and chipper, not scared. What made it strange was that she was 2 at the time and didn't really engage in pretend play or storytelling to that point, and as I mentioned, no toys were in sight. From there, we just had a funny toddler story to tell our friends and family that we affectionately named That Guy. That is the umbrella name we generally use for any other episodes or weird stuff that happens around the house. That guy was pulling a prank. Next, in January or February of 2018, I was again laying her down for bed along with her then 6-month-old brother. We were doing the usual cuddle up night talk when she said something along the lines of, "Now it's time for bed, just me, you, him, and her." My skeptic mind would argue that him could easily have been her little brother, but at the time she was still adjusting to having a sibling and rarely mentioned him, and he wasn't included in any of her talk that we were just having. What really was strange was her. Who's her? The only other female in the house is our cat, and she wasn't in the room at the time. Also, no toys were in the bed with us, and none were in the near vicinity of her bed that she could have been talking about. A little later that spring, a new name came into the conversation, Mr. Longneck. Short backstory, my daughter has this weird thing where she likes touching necks. Sometimes it's cuddly, sometimes it's when she's playing. We really can't explain it other than kids do weird stuff sometimes, and it started before we moved into this house. Anyways, she was getting put down for a nap and was a little high-strung. She was doing her usual neck-grabbing thing and suddenly did it a little tougher than usual, but not enough to hurt. And she said in a growly voice, "Mr. Longneck, Mr. Longneck." I had never heard her use this name, and it isn't a character in any YouTube or Netflix show she watches, so I asked who Mr. Longneck was. She just kind of giggled it off and was asleep 10 minutes later. This was when I started getting creeped out by her stories. In April of 2018, my husband found a time capsule in one of our heating vents, and we spent the afternoon looking through it. There had been a fire in our home in 2009, which we knew about, but in which no one was hurt. During the renovation after the fire, the owners at the time found a bunch of old stuff in the walls and included it with some of the pictures of the fire and a couple newspaper clippings. Among the old stuff was a pack of pearl buttons, some store catalogs from the 1940s, and a small notebook with some handwritten names inside. I presume these are the names of the original inhabitants, and I plan to find the book again and look up the history behind the names inside as well as the home. After all this, my husband and I are suspicious that if there is something paranormal going on, maybe these objects are keeping some energy here or something. I know this is long, but we're almost done here. In October of 2018, I was driving to my mother's house with only my son and daughter in the car. Along the way, daughter, now 3, asked from the back seat, "Mom, is that Grandpa?" I said, "Where?" She pointed to the empty front seat and said, "Right there." I told her Grandpa was at home as he had just recently moved in with us due to health issues. There was no one around on the street or sidewalks for her to point at either. Now, there have been other minor events that have happened, but these are the biggest ones to describe in detail. While we have to an extent encouraged her to be comfortable talking about it, I never pushed it in order to avoid leading the conversation or pulling answers out of her that she would offer just to appease the conversation. One day though, and a few times after, I just decided to ask her about it. Here is a brief detail of what she has said roughly in the past month. So I asked, "Can you tell me about that guy?" She asked, "What guy?" "You don't remember that guy?" She said, "No." So I said, "What about Mr. Longneck?" She said, "Oh yeah," her face lit up. "Can you tell me about him?" And various other questions led to, Mr. Longneck is a grown-up. He wears a monster on his clothes and on his hat. He is nice but also scary. He says trick or treat but doesn't wear a costume. He lives far away and he goes with Santa in the sky to his house where he belongs. He knocks on our big door, the patio door, and walks through our kitchen. These were her exact words, and while she was telling me this, was pointing a path from the door to one of our living room windows. I asked her what he says or does, and among a few other things, she mentioned that he plays in the kitchen with her with the spinny cow toy. This is one of those Fisher-Price pull-string farm toys. She never plays with it. I rarely see it and have never ever seen it in the kitchen. The specific details of this piqued my interest for sure. I also asked if he ever brought a friend to see if I could follow up on the her mentioned earlier. He brings a friend. She is a little girl, not a grown-up, and has yellow hair like me. She is never scared of these talks, although she does withdraw from the conversation when I ask her about the neck and why it is so long. We have saged the house, but that was quite a while ago and we plan to do it again. I think we will probably also get rid of the old items from the walls after we find out more about them, which is sad because it's part of the home's history. Hey everyone, it's The Laughing Corpse. Thank you so much for listening. I really hope you've enjoyed these stories. Please, if you'd like to hear more, make sure and hit that subscribe button and also that notification bell. It really helps me out. Also, if you look in the description box below, you'll find my email address. If you have any stories of your own, don't hesitate to send them to me, as it'll help me create more videos in the future. Until next time.